tactics.
So we actually managed to get rank 1 for 2 weeks in a row on Foot Champs. However, the main difference between last week and this week is the fact that this week I felt way more confident in my team and the tactics that we used to actually get to rank 1. The rewards were the same, though. Still shit. Now, you could be thinking I used a super team with the likes of Neymar, Mbappe, Messi, etc., right? All of those overpowered players in the defense as well. But this is actually the team that we used. So is this a good team? Yeah, it is. I'm not gonna lie. It is a pretty good team. But is it the most overpowered ones? No. I mean, we have Klosterman, who's like 2K in our back line, all right? However, like I said, I felt as though I did much better this past week with this team, even though it wasn't perfect, because we went 16-1, and I felt as though we were in firm control, and that one loss was also very unlucky, and I'm still pissed off about it. The squad that we had really filled in with some of the tactics that I was trying to do, at least for the most part, but then the tactics themselves just managed to work, and this is something that I hopefully you guys can learn and try to adapt into your games, so then you guys can move up the ranks in Foot Champs and in Division Rivals as well. So the formation in question is going to be the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow. Now I did have 2 variations of this, but we'll just go over one. The other one was with players that tended to press against me, right? Do that constant pressure BS. Now, I don't exactly know what formation works really well against the constant press, and I still haven't, but it just worked with this team because I had Erling Haaland and Mario Gomez, who are, 6'4" and 6'2" respectively, great in the air. I could literally just throw it up and they're gonna win any header. So that means we're just gonna go over the main tactics that we used for the majority of the weekend league. So this is what we are starting with, is the tactics. Now, we will also go over the instructions and the types of players that you need as well, because that is arguably more important. But for the tactics, we'll start out here. Defensively, we're going to go with balance, just because I typically don't really like to do pressure on heavy touch, press after possession loss, or constant pressure. One, because constant pressure is stupidly overpowered and should not be in the game whatsoever. But also because for the other two, at least, I feel as though it can waste stamina. And, when we have players on get forward and on fast build up, if we have pressure on heavy touch, I feel as though we're just going to throw everyone forward and we can get hit with a counter very easily. So we just tend to do it unbalanced. So with the width, it is at 35, and I know that's kind of strange because it's a narrow width in an already narrow formation, but what I noticed is that when the opposition has the ball on the sideline, what'll happen is that the defense will kind of shift from left to right. So they won't just clog the middle, they'll stay kind of compact and narrow, and they'll just shift from left to right. So what'll be a negative is, if the player will switch the ball on the other side of the field, you'll have to keep an eye out for that. But what's really good about having the width kind of narrow is that you can trap people on the sideline really well, and then you can start your counter attack. And then the depth we have at 65, and that's because I like having a little bit more of a compact distance between the defense and the midfield. I noticed that when it was at 50, which is the default setting, is there would be a much bigger gap between the defense and the midfield. And so if players had center attacking mids or left and right forwards in a 4-3-2-1, for example, it would just be completely open, and then my midfield couldn't really help defend, which is obviously not what we want, and we will go over the instructions as well. We do obviously have some midfielders to kind of help defend us. Moving on with the attack, we only have one thing that's different on the default, and that is the fast build-up on the build-up play. Now, we'll go over all the instructions and things like that later, but essentially, we are going to be having 6 players at least in the attack pretty much all the time, and so when we have 6 players that are going forward, we want this kind of fast build-up play, this counter-attacking speed, so that way we can just try to get all of those overloads at once. Obviously, that means you can get counterattacked, and again, we'll go over instructions, but we also have our left and right backs just on balance. They tend to bomb forward, and so that means you're left with your 2 center backs while everyone else tends to attack. So, keep that in mind, that sometimes you may just need to kind of get it to the goalie and then bomb it downfield. Everything else, though, is on balance. Obviously, chance creation is balanced, width is at 50, which is balanced. I believe players in the box at 5 is balanced, and then corners and free kicks, you can kind of do whatever you want. Whatever the hell tickles your fancy. I've never used that. Why would I ever say that? Moving on, we are going to be going with the instructions now, and they're a little bit in depth. Some of them are, some of them aren't. It just depends on, the position, obviously, but keep in mind that there is going to be some important details afterwards as well when we discuss the types of players that you need. For the goalie, we have comes for crosses and sweeper keeper. That's just what you tend to do for every single formation and every single tactic video that you have, just because it's a little bit better and it's pretty pretty overpowered as well. For the center backs, we have default everything, nothing's going to change. But then for the left and right backs, we also have default everything, which means that the attacking runs are going to be unbalanced. And so that means that they are going to be running up and down the field constantly. And we like that because it is providing width. This is a narrow formation. And so if you don't have that width, that means the left and right backs on the opposition team can really tend to go narrow, and then they can just have more defenders essentially. Having that width out wide with your left and right backs is very important, because even if they're not open, they'll at least provide some type of decoy against the opposition players, left and right backs, to defend. So then that means there's just going to be less defenders for you to have to worry about through the middle, which is obviously what this formation is, because it is a narrow formation. Next up, we have our midfield, starting off with our defensive mid. Pretty standard. Again, stay back while attacking, cover center. Pretty much everything, all of the instructions are the same for that in terms of, a one defensive mid formation. But then the left and right mids, these are going to be a little bit different. We have one on stay back while attacking, cover wing, and we have the other on balanced and cover center. Now for the defensive positioning, meaning the cover center versus cover wing, you can kind of just choose whoever you want for that. You can kind of mix and match for that. It's not vitally important. I just did Verts on cover center because he tended to drift it out wide a little bit more in terms of the attack, and so I wanted him on cover center, so then he would shift in a little bit more defensively, and then he would already be more narrow in the attack. But again, you can kind of mix and match, do what you want for that as well. What is important though is that you have one center mid on balanced attack, and then you have the other center mid on stay back while attacking. Finally, moving on to the attack, we have our center attacking mid, who is just on stay forward, and we do this for a couple of reasons. So one is the fact that for some reason, if I don't have it on stay forward, they tend to go play left back for some reason. It's a positioning issue that's been in the game for literally 5 years, and I've never seen anyone talk about it. Maybe it's just me, but it's something that really needs to be fixed. Thankfully though, it works out that he's on stay forward, because for our two strikers, we have them on drift wide. Now the reason why we have them on drift wide is also for a couple of reasons, because one, I noticed they tend to run through the middle and they would kind of cross over each other's paths to make a run, and so essentially one defender could just mark both of them at the same time. So I have them on drift wide so they don't do that. So the center attacking mid that is on stay forward, it actually tends to help this because he tends to make those runs directly through the middle. Our two strikers who are on drift wide will kind of drag those center backs out just a little bit, and it's going to create a lot of space through the middle for our center attacking mid to run. And finally, we are going to be talking about the types of players that you need for each position. Now in previous tactics videos, there only tends to be one or two players that I really, want you guys to focus on, that you really need, this specific player for. But in this one, you actually need a little bit more. So you really need to pay attention to this part, because if you don't have the right players, then this whole thing is just essentially just going to fall apart. So starting with the center backs, I would recommend both of them be pretty good on the ball and pretty good at passing, just because, like I mentioned before, we have, fast build up. Our left and right backs are be pushing up the field constantly. And so that means those two center backs are essentially the only people not in the attack. And so you either have to dribble decently well with them, or you just have to boot it forward or pass it back to the goalie, who then boots it forward. So again, you want to make sure that they're decent on the ball so you don't get caught out and lose it for an easy goal for your opposition. For the left and right backs, I would recommend that both of them have very, very good stamina. I mean, both of them do, and I still had subs on the bench. So really keep that in mind. If you're in foot champs, for example, and it has a chance to go into extra time, keep some subs on the bench. Along with that though, because they are getting forward, I would recommend that they are good at some type of attacking ability, whether it's crossing, or if they just happen to be really good at shooting, like I know Florenzi can shoot the ball pretty well, that's something I would recommend as well. So crossing is usually going to be the main thing, because most left and right backs can cross. Make sure they can do that, and that's going to be very good in your attack. Next, we move on to the defensive mid. Now, I'm singling this one out right now because this is by far and away the most important tactic, and if you don't have the right player for this, it will ruin everything. So again, make sure you pay attention to the most important tip in this video right here. Make sure the defensive mid has medium-high work rates at least. The reason why I say this is because we actually had informed Dennis Zakaria playing defensive mid for us, and he's, stats-wise, a solid player. He is better than Emre Can on paper. The thing is, though, is that Zakaria has high-medium work rates, and even though he was on the exact same instructions, the exact same tactics, everything was the same, he has those high-medium work rates that pushed him forward further than the attacking mid, sometimes even further past the strikers. And if you have a player that puts themselves himself out of position, it doesn't matter how good they are literally useless to you. I'm not saying Emre Can is the best player I've ever used, but because of his medium-high work rates, we were actually able to get these tactics to work, and it genuinely was fantastic. He was a godsend to us once we got rid of Zakaria. Next up, we have our center mids. Now, this one is pretty standard. Obviously, one of them who is on stay back while attacking, you probably want to be a little bit better defensively. The other one who is on balance, you probably want to be a little bit better attacking-wise. That makes sense. Next, we have our center attacking mid. For this guy, we mentioned before, because he is on stay forward, because he tends to split the gap between the two center backs, make sure that this guy can shoot pretty well. I'm not saying it has to be a striker, but genuinely a striker could arguably do just as good of a job in this case, just because, you know, again, he's going to be getting in good attacking positions. You want him to get him the ball, and if he's in that spot, you want him to be able to shoot. Simple as that. And then for the two strikers, there are two things I would recommend, and that is one, that I probably would say one of them needs to be pretty tall, or at least good in the air. Someone like Mario Gomez, Erling Haaland, Ivan Toney's inform, something like that, because if you need to just boot the ball forward, which you might have to because the team is on get forward, you can just boot it to that guy who is a good aerial threat and then win the ball. Not only that, but it's also going to be very good on corner kicks and goal kicks as well. I mean, I think I scored 4 or 5, maybe even 6 goals strictly from corner kicks because of Mario Gomez. The other thing is going to be to have high attacking work rates on your strikers. I mentioned that Mario Gomez specifically has this stay forward tactic, and that's because of his medium work rates. There were times where even though he's on getting behind, he wouldn't really make a run forward, he would just stay in place. So I would really recommend high attacking work rates, because Erling Haaland, for example, would be busting runs in left and right, no problem, while Mario Gomez just... Beyond those two things, though, I think you could probably get away with any two strikers. Honestly, I would even say that you could probably try two strikers that aren't aerial threats, because, you know, as long as they work for you, I would say that's the most important thing. So when it comes to the two strikers, at least in the terms of, you know, finding the specific player that you need, probably the least important position on the field. So again, as long as it, you know, works for you, whatever two strikers work, you'll probably be fine with it. So that is going to do it for this tactics video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you do have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and we'll try to get those answered for you guys. But like I said, that is going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been DMG. Peace.